With confirmation that Matt Reeves' sequel to The Batman is in pre-production, there has been a lot of speculation and a lot of wish lists being thrown around the internet and thrown around YouTube discussing who should be the villain, who should be the big bad that Batman has to take down in that sequel. And we've had Poison Ivy on that list, Mad Hatter, the Court of Owls, Bane, Killer Croc, so many great Batman rogues that could potentially fill that spotlight. But the one that seems to be at the top of everyone's list, the one that I see getting thrown around on Twitter left and right, the one that I see at the top of the wish list of every YouTuber is Mr. Freeze. And today I wanted to go through why that's the case and why everyone is so anxious for a new adaptation of Mr. Freeze on the big screen, especially after the 1997 Batman and Robin film starring George Clooney, Arnold Schwarzenegger as Mr. Freeze, that opened to very less than stellar results and box office, and ultimately ended up getting the whole Batman franchise shelved until Batman Begins in 2005. To kick off this conversation, I think it's very apparently clear to anyone who's seen especially Heart of Ice from Batman the Animated Series or read the Batman graphic novels that Mr. Freeze has a lot of untapped pathos that really was not clear in Batman and Robin back in 97. Mr. Freeze is very close to being an anti-hero. He can't quite make that cutoff because he does kill a lot of people in cold blood, pun intended of course, but he does have strong motivations for his actions. His wife is dying of a terminal illness. He cryogenically freezes her to try and find a cure, and the lab that he is using to try and find this cure turns on him, and the greedy corporate stuffed shirts ultimately cause an accident which turns him into Mr. Freeze. He needs his suit to survive, and he rigs it so that he can freeze people with a cryogenic freeze ray, which of course I think could be reimagined into something a bit more realistic, but I don't necessarily think it has to be. I don't know that the realism is what drains the character of that pathos, because again, it happens in Batman the Animated Series or the Arkham games, but never does that fantastical element ever cause my care of the characters or the story to dwindle. And I actually think that that's the first point that I really want to hit home, is that Mr. Freeze would allow for a somewhat more fantastical story to take place with a character who is somewhat less grounded. The last 4 solo Batman films have really tried to ground Batman in reality. What would Batman be in our world? But I think that a lot of us recognize that in the comics, Batman is a very mythical character, and there isn't all that much realism. Just because he's a human being doesn't mean that the people he fights against are also all just very human. He fights a lot of superhuman enemies, and that's what makes Batman so cool to a lot of us, is the fact that a guy who is just a man can hold his own against some of these villains that other superheroes with actual powers don't stand a chance against. He uses his intelligence as his primary resource to find people's weakness and take them down, and Mr. Freeze is a perfect villain for Batman to do that against, and that's why he works so well. There are other great Batman villains that have that strong emotional pull, like Two-Face, but I think that the reason that Two-Face isn't at the top of this list, as Mr. Freeze is because Two-Face is also just a guy, and Mr. Freeze has a little bit more to him in terms of visual spectacle, what you could do with his abilities. And again, it takes Batman and uproots him from that gritty realism that we've seen so many times in a row now, and gives him something a little bit more fantastical that can still feel gritty and dark. I think when you look at the last live-action attempt at Mr. Freeze, it was butchered, and I don't know who to fault for that, and I don't really want to. I think that everyone involved was trying to make an entertaining film, but it ultimately didn't land for pretty much anyone. I do know some people who enjoy it either as comedic relief, or some people who do feel that it's a somewhat underappreciated Batman story, but Batman and Robin does suffer from being very, very, very campy, and it loses a lot of the integrity of those characters that we know and love from the comics. Mr. Freeze is a very strong Batman villain. I think that those of us who have played the Arkham games recognize that he was one of the strongest villains in the entire Arkham series. He was in 3 of the 4 games, Origins as DLC, Night as DLC, but if you played the Cold Cold Heart DLC, and then Arkham City, and then the Arkham Knight Season of Infamy DLC, he gets a full arc. He is one of the most fleshed out and developed villains of that entire series, And so for those of us who know the Batman lore, Mr. Freeze feels very much like an A-lister, whereas in the mainstream he feels very C or D-list. So to see this beloved character done justice on screen would be just a visual, wonderful experience for those of us who really are endeared to this character and love his story. And the final point that I'll bring this all together with is that it would fit in the Matt Reeves universe very well. Perhaps not in the sense of hyperrealism. That is one thing that would need to change to include this character, unless they tried to do a more realistic take on him, which I would be okay with. I feel that, again, you risk losing the integrity or the endearing qualities of that character, but I do think there's a way that you could do it, especially if you retain that origin that people know and love so much. But I think that in terms of where Batman is emotionally, that could give him a lot of conflict to deal with. He, in his first film, became a symbol of hope by the end of it. He wants to inspire the people of Gotham while bringing fear to his enemies. What happens when this version of Bruce encounters a guy who's doing very bad things to save someone he loves? What lengths would Bruce Wayne have gone to save his parents if he could have when he was a boy? I think that these are really interesting questions to explore in the Batman mythology. And between the script and the characterization and the costume design and the set design and the cinematography of the first Batman film, it all feels like it would just be very suited to bring this character to the forefront. Doing Mr. Freeze now, we can tell for sure would do him justice. And seeing the quality of that first film, what they did for Riddler and Falcone and Catwoman, and bringing all of that quality to a character like Mr. Freeze would be a dream come true for Batman fans. So let me know in the comments below what you think. Do you agree that Mr. Freeze would be a great pick for the Batman 2, or is there another that's at the top of your list? Thanks you guys so much for watching. Please be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. YouTube has been pretty relentless on my uploads lately. It hasn't been recommending my content, so again, make sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell so that you can continue to check out my content if you enjoy this type of video. Thanks again so much for watching, and we will see you guys in the next one.